make welcome our dear friend and most capable State Representative, Trent Ashby.
Thank you. Y'all sit down. Let's see if you're still standing at the end of the speech. First off, let me say what a privilege it is, once again, to be before the Trinity County Patriots. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge right up off the bat the huge void in the room. And I want to join with Sharon and all of you and just let Mickey know how much we love her. You know, I was fortunate to be able to go to Les's funeral, and what a beautiful celebration of his life. Amen. And we miss him. We miss him. And I will say that and I've got a lot of memories of Les, but one of my very first was when I just announced I was running. Shortly after that, y'all invited me to come over to learn a few things during the question and answer session. And I'll never forget, after that what seemed like an eternity of an evening to get out of here, I was walking out and Les was out there. And he said, "Trent, come over here for a minute." He said, "You gave a good talk in there." He said, "You got peppered a little bit too." I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he goes, "You hang in there." He said, "We got your back." And I tell you what, I'll never forget those conversations I had with Les, and we miss him. We miss him deeply. Thank you. By the way, I saw Ford at the bank yesterday, and so we're keeping in touch very, very closely. Listen, I'm going to save plenty of time for Q&A, but they asked me to come back tonight. And by the way, I know it's been a while since we met, so I'm glad I could be a good excuse for y'all to get the old gang back together, Frida, and listen to really a recap. And I'm going to hit it at a high level. And then also, if you don't have a handout that I left at the front table, I think a lot of people do, it's on the constitutional amendments. Let me ask real quick. No, I better not. No, I'm going to ask. How many of you have already voted in this election on the constitutional amendments? Okay, good. So about 10 of you. Yeah. All right. Well, you still got time. That's the good news. Early voting is still ongoing. There's 7 constitutional amendments. There is a summary. Usually it's in the newspaper as well. There's plenty of information on the internet, which is where I pulled that information off of a few weeks ago. And let me just say, let me mark this off the list real quick. On these 7 constitutional amendments, I've had 1 or 2 already ask me that have looked at them. Most of them, I think, would be considered fairly non-controversial. The one that I could probably get the most questions about is the one that deals with the sports charitable raffle, and basically allowing foundations for professional sports teams, and think Dallas Cowboys, for example, to allow them through their foundation to conduct these charitable raffles. And the reason why I raise that, because I'm a good Baptist. And there's plenty of people at my church that feel that could be construed as an expansion of gambling. And so that's really the one that's probably generated the most discussion about whether or not that's something that we need here in the state of Texas. And I wanted kind of to single that one out, just to put it on your radar. Think about it. If you want more information, I brought with me the detailed analysis of each one of these 7, the talking points that were made for these amendments, as well as, to the extent there was opposition, what the opposition said, and I have that, and I'll be glad to share it with you later this evening if you'd like to see it. So, let me give you what I think is some interesting information. I get asked a lot, Trent, just give us a flavor. What is it like over there every other year when you go to Austin and you're there for basically 5 months or 140 days? I mean, what's it like? And so I thought it would be interesting for y'all to have a sense as to the number of bills that are filed, and the number of bills that are passed, and then the number of bills that are actually signed by the that make it through the House, the Senate, and the governor signs. So let me start out with some numbers tonight. So for this last session, the 85th session, anybody want to take just a guess how many bills were filed in the House and the Senate? Yeah. Well, let me just give you the answer. And let me say this, it was a record number of bills this session between the House and the Senate. The number is 6,631 bills were filed in the House and the Senate. Now keep in mind, we're only there for 140 days. So we got 6,631 bills that have been filed in the House and Senate, okay, that are eligible for consideration. As you've heard me say, and as you've heard others say, the way that our forefathers set up our constitutional form of government in the state of Texas through the legislature, it really is designed more to kill bills than to pass bills. And I think most people would agree, especially if you looked at a lot of these 6,000 bills, that's a good thing. So, the number of bills that made it through the House and the Senate through the process and that actually made it to the governor's desk is 1,262. Or 18% of the bills that were filed actually made it to the governor's desk. Okay? The governor vetoed 51 of those. So in the end, there was 1,211 new laws that were signed in effect in the state of Texas by June the 18th or whatever the last day the governor could sign a bill was. Now the other thing you might think of is, well, that's a lot of bills. That's got to be a lot of votes, and it was another record this past session. And this is for the House. I can't tell you how many votes they cast in the Senate, but I can tell you how many votes we cast in the House. Again, this is a record. 2,061 votes I had to cast.
Oh my God!
And keep in mind, you don't vote for the first 4 or 5 weeks. You're waiting on committees to be assigned, bills to be filed, bills to start through the committee hearing process. So most of those votes, those 2,061, really occurred in about a 3-month time frame. And that doesn't account for the votes we cast in committees. So we're busy. And I hope that gives you a kind of an idea of the volume of ideas that the members of the legislature have, and then how many can make it through the process. And that's a pretty good, about 15, 16, 17% usually is about the number of bills that are actually make it to the governor's desk. So this really was not any different this session when you look at the total bills that made it to the governor's desk. So another thing that might be of interest to you is, well, how many of those 6,631 bills did you file? Well, I set a record this session, and normally my number is pretty low because I'm one of these guys that believes that, hey, you know, Texas has been around since 1836 and we've lived without that law. Odds are we probably could survive without it, right? But I filed 24 bills, 12 of which became law. So I had a kind of a 50% record there. And when I tell you what 2 or 3 of them are, you're going to really like it. And let me say this, and this has never changed, and so I'm going to be a little bit of an echo chamber because you've heard me say this. I'm not one of these guys that walk in there that says, I've got to file a bill because I had a great idea. Again this session, out of those 24 bills, probably 20 of those were ideas that came from you, that came as I was out and about. Someone contacted my office. I was at an event and said, hey, I have an idea. And I'll give you some examples. I had a pastor call me from Leon County, and he had just bought a church trailer. And he said, he called my office and he said, Trent, he said, I don't understand this. He said, I have a religious exemption from sales tax on any automobile I purchase. But when I go purchase a trailer for the church, you're going to hit me with sales tax? That just doesn't seem consistent, and it doesn't seem right. And I said, Pastor, I agree. So I filed a bill this session that basically would exempt church trailers from sales tax. That's one of those 12 that became law. Another one came out of Trinity County. Now, the lady that gave me this idea, she's not here tonight, but she called me actually 2 sessions ago, and she knew of a veteran who was deployed overseas, and while he was deployed, he got a notice from the appraisal district. That, now, let me be real quick say, the person that notified me was Trinity County, but this soldier he's a Walker County resident. So this occurred in Walker County, okay? So I don't want anybody, my county officials to get upset here, all right? You didn't do this, all right? And what happened was, while he was deployed, which he was deployed for 14 months, while he was over there in Afghanistan, the notice went out. He never got the notice. It said that you have to basically check the box to continue your agriculture exemption on your property, your land that you own. Well, he didn't respond. Again, he didn't get his mail. And so they took away his ag exemption. And all of you know what a privilege it is to have an agroforestry exemption, right? And that's not right. That's not the way Texans treat our veterans and our soldiers. And so I filed a bill that says that if you're serving in our armed forces and you're a Texas resident and you own property, that you cannot lose your ag or forestry exemption if you're deployed and that occurs. And so I was really proud to work with a number of our veterans in the House to get that legislation signed, and ultimately the governor reached out, and he was very happy to sign that bill into law. The only other bill I would mention that I authored this session that I think would be of great interest deals with, have y'all all heard of this high-speed rail project, bullet train between Houston and Dallas? One of the things that I'm probably strongest on is private property rights, and most rural people are. I mean, you know, of course, I'm a Republican, and our party believes strongly in private property rights until, you know, sometimes we get to Austin and that doesn't fit in the box, and well, maybe. Well, I always am going to stand for private property rights. And a big part of my opposition to that project, that train, deals with private property rights. And so, and also I will confess, I have Leon and Madison County in our district, and 100% of the people that live in Leon and Madison County are opposed to this project. So, as their representative, I need to be vocal in my opposition, and I have been very vocal. So, one of the ideas, and this was probably the only good idea I've had maybe, is this company that keeps going around that's pitching this idea, they keep telling everybody, well, we're not going to spend any of the taxpayer money on this project. Exactly. Now you can say it, I probably better not say it from the microphone, but I haven't quite felt the need to just believe that. And so I thought, well, hang on a second. We've done a lot of research on this. And listen to this. There is not a high-speed rail project in the United States nor in the world that is not subsidized at some level by a governmental entity. And yet here's a private company that's using Japanese money, the Bank of Japan, to pay for a project in Texas, telling us we don't need any taxpayer dollars. We're not going to need any subsidies. Well, I thought, well, you know what? Let's put their money where their mouth is. So I filed a bill that said that if a high-speed rail project is ever built in Texas, that no taxpayer dollars can be spent on it. It is now law. All right. Now here's where I'm going to fly through some bills, okay? And this is, if it generates an idea or something, we can maybe take a few questions about some of this, but and in no particular order. And these were primarily bills that I was involved with. I was a co-author of the bill that most of you probably heard of that you know, really speaks to our Second Amendment rights in Texas. And one of the things that I support is doing away completely with the handgun license fee. It's been at $140. I co-authored a bill to drop that original and the renewal fee dollar amount to $40 for the general public. One of the things, again, that I was real proud of this session, I know you were too, to see that we accomplished, and this was one of those accomplishments I mentioned earlier, is we have some cities, and it's not Trinity and it's not Groveton, it's the big cities, and really it's one or two, that were thumbing their nose and have been thumbing their nose at federal law as it pertains to immigration. And we refer to them as sanctuary cities. Yeah. Well, guess what? We banned sanctuary cities this session. That is now the law of the United States. Another issue that I've heard folks in this room and across my district is voter ID. And that we need to strengthen our voter ID requirements in Texas and try to root out some of the nefarious activities that allegedly may be occurring. And as you know, we attempted to do this back in 2011. Well, in 2016, the courts ruled that a part of that law was unconstitutional. So this session, we went back with a scalpel and we addressed the part of the voter ID law that they said was unconstitutional, and we passed it. So assuming it holds up in the court, we now have a stronger voter ID law here in the state of Texas. Another issue that draws deeply on my faith, and I'm sure on your faith as well, deals with abortions. And we have to be careful at the state level because there is a Supreme Court and they have spoken. But you're not going to find a state in America that pushes the limits more on restricting abortion than the state of Texas. And one of the things under the umbrella of abortion that has stood out to our prosecutors in Texas is there is a federal law that bans partial birth abortion. But we've had some challenges, primarily with our Attorney General's office and some of our prosecutors, prosecuting some of these partial birth abortion issues at the state level because it's a federal law. And so what we did this session is we said, we're going to make this real easy. We're going to pass a state law that bans partial birth abortion to make it easier to prosecute these folks that are going out and getting the partial birth abortions, which again is already illegal. So that was something that we were able to do, and I was certainly glad to support and co-author that bill to ban partial birth abortion in the state of Texas. We have any retired teachers in here? I knew we did. I knew we did. I knew we did. You know what I'm about to say. It's one thing to say you're involved in a bill and you've co-authored a bill, but then there's authoring a bill. Your name is on the bill. Well, when I went over there in January, I was not an expert on Teacher Retirement System Healthcare, or TRS Care, which is the healthcare system for the retired teachers in Texas. I come from a family of teachers, grandmother, mother, 2 sisters that are active teachers. So I am a strong advocate for our teachers. The system that's in place, TRS Care, I could go on and on this, but I'm trying to figure out how just in 2 minutes or less. Basically, when we walked into session, TRS Care was facing a $1.4 billion shortfall just for the next 2 years. And basically, every 2 years after that, that number doubles. Okay? The system was broken. And it was broken, no one's fault, but when it was set up back in the early, mid-'80s, it was funded based on the number of active teachers in the state of Texas, not on actual healthcare cost. Now, y'all know what healthcare costs have done, right, in America over the last 12 years. They've doubled and in some cases tripled. So we got a healthcare system for our retired teachers that's based, the funding is not based on healthcare costs. And so it's been broken. We've known it was coming for a number of years, for a long time actually. This was going to happen. It was not actuarially sound. This session we had to do something. And oh, by the way, this session, unlike the last 2 that I've served in, we had for the first time a deficit budget. I mean, we had a deficit projection. We have to balance our budget, state of Texas. We have to balance it. But we had a deficit revenue picture. So $1.4 billion unfunded liability just to get us through 2 years and a reduction in our revenue in the state of Texas. That presented some major challenges for our state. The speaker came to me and he said, Trent, he said, look, he said, you're the chairman of the subcommittee that deals with TRS Care. I know you're not on public education where technically the issue falls, he said, but I know where your family's background is. I know the relationship you have with all the members of the body, both Democrats and Republicans. This is a bipartisan issue. He said, we have got to do right for our teachers, and I'm asking you to help carry the bill to address this issue. And, oh, by the way, this was the day before the deadline to file bills. No pressure, right? So I'll never forget, late at night, I had my staff in my office and the committee staff, and I was like, guys, it's going to take up the whole session. I mean, this is a big deal, right? Affecting hundreds of thousands of Texans. And so, long story short, I agreed to champion that effort. And in the end, there was some changes made, new law. I worked very closely with Senator or Chairwoman Joan Huffman in the Senate, who carried the Senate bill. We added $500 million to our TRS care, and it wasn't a perfect bill. Matter of fact, when we came back in the special session, the governor added it to the call because of the outcry from the teachers across the state of Texas, and the lieutenant governor said, we've got to do more for our retired teachers. Hey, I'm your biggest fan. Because my name's on the bill. Absolutely. We need to do more. And so, in the end, regular and then special, we added right at $500 million for our retired teachers. They saw their premiums go up. They saw their deductibles go up. And keep in mind, all of our retired teachers live on a fixed income. They don't draw Social Security.
That's right.
All they have is what they get from their TRS pension, and the average pension.
And we don't get our husband's Social Security.
That's exactly right, because of the federal Social Security offset.
Yeah, they say they steal.
Which is not right.
It is not right. Hey, we're all going to jump on this bandwagon. I mean, there's no disagreement here. Yeah.
I write every month.
Good.
Nothing happens.
And you need to continue to.
Nothing
If I could fix that for you in the state of Texas,
In 1
it would be
year,
done.
I'll be up.
Well, just know there's a lot of people that want to see that fixed.
It's just not right.
It's not right.
Not when somebody that doesn't work for 35, 40, 50 years, and they get the Social Security, and they get their husband's Social Security, and I as a teacher get nothing, and I work 2 jobs. I paid into Social Security.
I'm with you 100%.
How many of us in here paid into Social Security?
You want to
Yeah.
line up and just let us
Yeah,
go?
I'm going to tell you, Yvonne, right?
Yes, sir.
She's preaching the gospel here. Everything she said is right. But I just want to make sure y'all know what she's asking for has got to be fixed in Washington. I can't fix it in Austin.
Firemen and
Firemen.
Firemen and policemen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, they're all affected
Yep.
by it.
And so we've got to support our retired teachers. And you have my pledge, and I promise you my colleagues know that I'm going to continue to fight for our retired teachers. But that was probably the biggest challenge that I had this session, and frankly probably where I spent most of my time in the last 2 months was working on TRS care. And I'm proud of what we were able to do, but I'm hopeful we can do more when we head back next session. And I've already had the governor's staff and the lieutenant governors confirm that we're going to have to work together on this. And so I'm going to remain optimistic next session that we're going to be able to do more for our retired teachers in the state of Texas. Speaking of teachers, one of the things that has really caught the headlines, it's certainly not happening every day or week, not even every month, but it has happened even here in East Texas, are these high-profile cases of teachers being involved in inappropriate relationship with students. And we really didn't have a strong law in the books to address these teachers that engage in that type of activity with these minors. And so what we were able to do this session is we expanded the criminal liability for these folks to include educators who target these susceptible children, and also make it a criminal penalty for them if they fail to report, as well as we are now requiring that schools have to mandate parental notification if there comes to light that this type of occurrence occurs. And here's the big one, though. I mentioned the pension for our teachers. We revoke their pension. We take away their pension if they are convicted of an inappropriate relationship with a child. And I think that's right. You know, if you go back to January, I think it was the 18th, when Governor Abbott came into the House chamber and he gives his State of the State speech, every governor always rolls out, usually it's 5 to 7 or 8 quote-unquote emergency items that, 2 things. One, by designating that item as emergency, we don't have to wait for a certain amount of time to elapse before we can start a committee hearing or start working on that bill. We can start immediately. So that's big when the governor declares something an emergency. The other thing, it sets the tone on what the priorities are for the governor for that session. And if y'all didn't know this, and hopefully you all did, but this session, his priorities, and I would say they were shared with the House and the Senate, was strengthening the way the state of Texas takes care of our children. In one case, we were under a federal court order to reform our child protective services, something that no one is proud of. But we were in a situation where we had some children literally living in office buildings, and CPS didn't know where they were. And these children are in the custody of the state of Texas, by the way. And so this session, we spent a lot of time and passed several bills that I lump into a comprehensive effort to really strengthen the way that we treat our children, and then they make sure they're protected. And so I'm going to mention a few of those real quick. I think you all agree with me when we talk about children that are vulnerable in our society, that need to be taken maybe away from a parent or their parents. The best case scenario, though, is to keep them in the family, to keep that family unit together. It's called kinship care. It's called kinship care. And it is a compassionately conservative thing to do. And so it was a priority for the leadership in the House and the Senate and the governor to strengthen the family unit by making sure that we preserve the right to allow that child that may be in that home to stay with a family member if appropriate. And so we passed one of the bills under the big umbrella of making sure that we strengthen our kinship care. The other thing that I would say that we did is we completely overhauled Child Protective Services. Probably the only, I agree. Whether you're talking about CPS or CASA or the judicial system that have to work with these children through the process, the thing that leapt off the page at everybody was we didn't have enough people watching out for our children in the care of the state. And I may be wrong on this, but I think that's probably the only area where we actually had to go out and appropriate more dollars to hire a few more state employees was under CPS, so that these caseworkers, to put more people in the field to go out and take care of these children. And by the way, I'm a big CPS fan, but asking a CPS worker to have 24 children, that was the average. 24 children under their care, and they're supposed to see them every 3 days? That's impossible. So we had to make some budget decisions on hiring more CPS workers, and we were able to do that this session, again, without any opposition. It was the right thing to do. I didn't know this, and this won't surprise you when I tell you this, but there are groups in the state of Texas, and certainly outside of Texas, that really don't appreciate nor respect the role that our faith and religious community have in terms of adoption. Matter of fact, they're targeted. And so one of the things we did this session is we passed a now law that's called the Freedom to Serve Children Act that protects faith-based child welfare service providers from discrimination or legal adverse actions for exercising their deeply held religious beliefs in the context of the foster care system. And Chris, it was the right thing to do. I mean, I shudder to think where we would be in the state of Texas if the churches in this state and the people that go to our churches stopped raising their hand to take in these children that are in our foster care system. We'd be in big trouble. We need to encourage that, not discourage it. And so I was really proud to be a co-author of that bill that we were able to get signed by the governor. It is. The last thing I'll say under kind of our child welfare, child protective services umbrella is CPS was rolled up under the biggest state agency, which is Health and Human Services. And the governor supported what I'm about to say. We all felt like that to give these children really the attention they deserve, they needed to be a standalone agency outside of HHSC. And the question was, well, where do we put them and under whose supervision? And so House Bill 5 makes the Department of Family and Planning Services a standalone agency that reports directly to the governor. So that way, there's no getting lost in the system or who's in charge. The governor asked for that, and I'm applauding for that. And so now our governor has direct control and authority in dealing with the Department of Family and Protective Services. Again, this session, mental health was a big focus. I won't go through a lot of the details here other than to say that Sheriff Wallace, along with all of my county judges that deal with this on a daily basis, we're asking for some help. And the problem really is probably more pervasive in rural Texas than it is in some of the other parts of the state. And y'all know that. I mean, it's right here in Trinity. It's in Trinity County. A lot of mental health. And where do these people that need mental health treatment, where do they end up? They end up possibly under a bridge. A lot of them end up in jail. And guess who pays for their jail stay? All of you. Right? So one of the things that made good, responsible, fiscal, conservative sense was trying to find a way to get these people the help they need, the treatment they need, get them on their medications, and get them out of the jail where they're having to deal with them in the judicial system, and our sheriffs aren't having to constantly take them in and apprehend them and put them in the jail. And so we created I'm really excited about this. We created what we call a jail diversion grant program that basically allows the locals to do exactly what I was just describing. Now, it's one thing to say, well, that sounds great, but what are you really doing? Well, it's a grant program. So there's money behind this effort. We have, and this is important for rural Texas, I mentioned most of our mental health challenges are in rural Texas. 50% of the funding has to go to a rural county that is under that grant program. That's huge for rural Texas.
Yes, it is.
That is huge. I tell you, that is probably one of the biggest bills we passed that went under the radar. But for rural Texas, and in particular East Texas, this is going to be, I think, a game changer. I hope it's a game changer for the folks that are treating these folks that desperately need mental health attention. Ethics reform. I think we all agree, probably at all levels.
Yeah.
Well, ethics reform sometimes is good.
Give us about 10 of those.
Yeah, about 10 of those. Yeah, well, I wish the feds would take our lead here, let me tell you. I won't bore you with all that. Let's just say we passed 2 bills that the governor wanted to deal with ethics reform. One of the things, and I'm not going to mention any particular colleague of mine that was under indictment, but that sounds good, doesn't it? But one of the things that I think we can all agree to, I know we can, is that if you are a state elected official and you are indicted and convicted of a felony, you don't deserve certain benefits.
That's
Right? You agree with that? Now, under this new law, not only do you not receive, if you were entitled to a pension, you're immediately removed from office. Yeah, that's pretty severe. The other thing that, now, Chris, you tell Mike I did this for him, okay? All right. This happened in Houston, and when I say this, y'all are growing up. Some of you will remember this happening not too long ago. There was a particular preacher in the Houston area who got a summons, or that's not the word, it's not summons, Casey, you would know the word I'm looking for here, but he was subpoenaed to provide his sermon, the message, because he stepped on some toes, right? So one of the things, an outcry, if you will, from that incident we heard from our pastors, primarily the Texas Pastors Council, is that we need protection from this. I mean, we're up here, we have a First Amendment right too, but we need to be able to preach the gospel, speak the word without fear of having a subpoena come by every Monday after our Sunday service. So we passed Senate Bill 24, which is the Religious Sermon Protection Act, which I was a co-author of, that says that won't happen in the state of Texas. Get out there and preach the word and don't fear about being subpoenaed.
We had a lot of Bibles delivered to him too.
That's right, he did. And I hope he read one of them. Yeah, yeah, good. The other thing, while I'm kind of on the religious topic, is and we didn't do a lot of this, but we wanted to put this in statute, and it is now, the statute is part of House Bill 889. We are going to prohibit any state investment of money, state dollars, in any entity who boycotts our friend Israel. We will not put money with those companies. The last, and almost the last thing I want to mention is there was an isolated situation, really it was right up in the Metroplex, where there was confusion about whether or not Sharia law was being used in a court ruling and whether or not it violated the federal and state constitution. Y'all hear about this? I did. I read about it. Yeah, that's right. And it was about, I think, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so this past session, and there was a big effort, by the way. There was a lot of people talking about this bill. It's called the American Laws for American Courts Bill.
Yes.
Yeah, we got it done. We got it done. We got it done. And basically it says that if the application of the law would violate a right that is guaranteed by the Texas or the federal Constitution, that it's thrown out.
Thank you. All right.
So, well, she'll be pleased with this. I usually get a question about border security. This session, we're going to take our president at his word, and he is fighting for us on this, on border security. You know, that is a federal responsibility. They had completely, prior to President Trump, ignored their responsibility, right, on the southern border. So, again, this session, we did appropriate $800 million for Texas to continue to shore up our southern border with Mexico. We're going to hire with that another, last session we did the same amount. We hired 250 DPS troopers, primarily stationed in South Texas along the border counties, out to El Paso down to Brownsville, I think, right? Sound like you know. This session, we did the same thing. We're going to hire another 250 troopers. And the reason why that's important is because the troopers in Trinity County were on rotation, just like the troopers in all 254 counties in Texas. Every so often, they had to be deployed away from protecting you and go down to the border. This will help make sure that your local DPS troopers stay right here.
Yes.
So it made a lot of good common sense. But we're counting on our president to help us out so we don't have to do that next session, appropriate another $800 million. I mean, we desperately need the feds to step up and do what they promised. Well, and when I say, but he's the leader, right? You're right. But he's got to have, he can't sign a bill unless the bill gets to his desk, right? So, there you go. Drain the swamp. Real quickly, appraisal review boards, the folks that want to protest their valuation, it's a process that really is not convenient for a lot of people that work. And so what we did is one of the bills that we passed, it says that now you can participate in that appraisal review board process by telephone. So you don't actually have to be there in person. Listen to this one. I thought this one was, I wish this was my idea. I love this bill. It's one of my favorite bills we passed all session. This bill says that when an agency adopts a new rule, okay, so not a bill, not a law, but if an agency adopts an administrative rule, that they must repeal an existing rule. Isn't that great? Let's see here. Any of you ever shoot any feral hogs? Yeah. Carl, good news for you. Now you can shoot them from hot air balloons. I'm looking for that hot air balloon right off 94 next time I'm driving that way. That was one of our new laws. We made it legal to shoot coyotes and feral hogs from a hot air balloon.
I want to know why that would be.
Yeah. Ooh, I didn't think about that. Now, I actually haven't heard anybody using that yet, but I'm sure there'll be some company that probably get somebody from the big city to spend way too much money to shoot one from a hot air balloon. How many of you, let me ask, how many of you have a license to carry? Okay? Put your hands down. How many females have a license to carry? Okay. Now this affects everybody, not just females, but this really was targeted towards the great ladies in the state of Texas. One of the things that I've heard, now a lot of my colleagues hadn't heard this complaint. I've heard quite a few. Of course, I probably have a higher percentage of licensed to carry folks in my district than most, but one of the things I heard was that the minimum caliber requirement for demonstrating proficiency, which is a .32 caliber, was a little too hot, a little too high, a little too strong. And so they wanted to use a smaller weapon, okay? And I'm fine with that. So what we did is we just repealed the .32 caliber minimum requirement. So now you can go get a license to carry fee if you prove proficiency with any size pistol.
Really?
Yeah. So we repealed the .32 caliber. Yeah. Well, hey, you know, I mean, I'm not sure I would carry that, but it takes, hey, and the right shot too, no matter what you shoot. Yeah, I've got some squirrels that have met their demise lately with a pellet gun. You know what? I'm gonna stop right there. I've covered a lot in the last 20 minutes with a lot of those bills. Let me wrap up my comments, and then I'm gonna open up for questions, and just say that. I have been on the phone for the last 36 hours. If you haven't heard, the Speaker, Joe Strauss, at about 10 o'clock yesterday announced that he was not resigning, he's stepping down, not running for Speaker again, okay? And the reason why that's important is because we will be working towards, over the next 14 months leading up to January the 8th, 2019, towards figuring out who the next speaker is going to be. And I've already had tonight several folks ask me some questions about that. And I would just say that you can't point to two speakers that got elected the same way. And historically, you know, the speaker's kind of drafted by the body. You know, and I just want you, but here's my point. I'm bringing this up to say this. I want you to know that should I be given the opportunity to go back and represent you in the next legislative session, I'm going to make sure that I evaluate all the candidates and that I select the one and support the one that is going to allow me, as your representative, to be put in the best position to represent my district. It will be a Republican. I will vote for a Republican, but there will be a lot of candidates. And I just want y'all to know that ultimately I'm looking for somebody that appreciates and respects the values of rural East Texas and that cares where Trinity County is and will put me in a position to allow me to be effective for you. And those are some of my requirements that I'm going to be looking at as I start evaluating these candidates. And by the way, we're not even really going to get you, there's already I think 2 or 3 that have announced, but we're really not going to get into this and, as far as really talking about it until probably about a year from now. Historically, things kind of start emerging in November after the general election. We actually know who's going to be serving in that next session, right? So there'll be a lot of chatter probably through about Sunday news cycle, and then this whole issue will probably die down for a while. But I just want y'all to know kind of where my heart is on that. I'm going to make sure that I'm standing timber tall for your interest and that we pick the right person that makes sure that our values are protected and represented in the next Speaker of the House. All right. With that, I'm going to hush up. Yes, ma'am.
I want to be a first question.
You got it.
But it's not a question. It's a statement. I would like to see the state of Texas step forward with some way to protect our historical sites and our statues and so forth. I mean, we're fighting all the time to put up historical markers, and then people want to take them down. So,
Right.
But anyway, I'd like to see that come up next time.
Well, let me say I agree with you.
Could you speak on the Alamo that changed?
Dorinda, anything but the Alamo. Yeah. Let me just say my name is not George P. Bush. That was not my idea. You know, if you're not aware, and by the way, this, and don't quote me on this, but to me this situation is pretty fluid right now. You know, our land commissioner that oversees the Alamo complex and all of our state properties, he and others envisioned an Alamo complex that would be different in the sense that it would be more interactive, attract more tourists. Maybe I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but he had a vision. Reimagine. That's the word. That's the word he's used. It has not gone over really well with quite a few people, especially. I think I've heard from about every member of the Daughters of the American Republic, every DAR chapter in my district has called me about it. So trust me, I am not out there pushing for what he's pushing for. I just hope, Dorinda, that he's listening. He is a state elected official, and again, this is not isolated to Trinity County. There's a lot of people across Texas that aren't real happy with what they see transpiring there. So I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I will tell you this. We have communicated his staff. There's a lot of people that are opposed to his idea in East Texas. So, yes?
Can you tell us if Little George is running again this year? And if he is, does he have an opponent?
I cannot tell you if he has an opponent, but he is on the ballot.
There we go.
Yes, Michael. By the way, I didn't get to say hello earlier. Good to see
It's
you.
all right. I was busy. But anyway, does Texas have a plan to protect their landowners against the Bureau of Land Management? Because they get pulled into the Bureau of Land Management courts, and there's a whole different standard there.
You know, in Texas, the only federal lands that we have the 4 national forests, which are right here in your backyard, one of them. Well, really 2 of them. And then you've got the national grasslands, which is up around Decatur. So we're really kind of blessed statewide in that we don't have a lot of federal land where we don't see a lot of BLM. Matter of fact, we see the U.S. Forest Service not BLM here in East Texas.
Well, what about the Bundys? What is that situation?
I don't know the latest on the Bundy situation up north. I'm sorry.
Because that can happen here.
They'll be taking their life in their own hands and have that happen. I'll put Carl Casey on them. And Sheriff Woody. All right.
In a hot air balloon.
In a hot air balloon. There you go with an AR-15. That's good. You know, while I'm waiting on the next hand to go up, I actually had made a point to say something, and it has nothing to do with legislation, but I don't get the opportunity to this very often, but I just want to say what a privilege it has been to work with Rich Chamberlain. Yeah. That guy right there, we're going to miss. He's been a true public servant, and I work with a lot of county commissioners, and I will tell you he is one of my favorites. He's very active at the state level on behalf of you here in Trinity County, along with others. Judge?
He'd be good for senator, wouldn't he?
Well, I better just kind of...
Thank you, Governor.
we'll all get promotions. But I sincerely mean that, though, Rich. You have been a real blessing to work with, and you've been a good friend. And I just
yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your service. And I'll say this, guys. I don't care whether it's the local school board, Elsie, or if it's President Bush or President Trump. Anywhere in between. And I'm really not talking about me, but I'm talking about really our county folks, our city elected officials, our school board people. Folks, we need, and I hope you'll agree with me here, we need good people to raise their hand to run for office and to serve, right? We want good people to do that.
Amen.
But increasingly we live in an environment, it seems like, and I blame a lot of this on social media, where it's hard to find good people that want to subject themselves to the punishment that it seems like that is nonstop, even at a local elected official capacity now.
Amen.
And so I say all that to say, we need good people right here. We need good people across this land, across America, to run for office for the right reasons, with a pure heart, without some great agenda, and that truly have a public servant heart. And to the extent that, and let me say, I don't expect you to agree with all of our officials, including me. But when you do agree, sometimes it's okay to give them an encouraging word and thank them for their service and say, hey, appreciate what you do, because I promise you, and as an old former school board member, you don't get a lot of that. And yet these people are giving their time and their service and their family time to serve you. And I got on a little bit of a soapbox on that point, but Rich, you've served valiantly, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yes, Corey, please.
One of the emergency priorities that Greg Abbott wanted was the Convention of States. And you were a co-author on SJR2. And I wish you might tell the group why and how that came about for you to vote for it.
Yeah. Well, did y'all hear that this is about the Convention of States, and as back during the introductions, he was recognized as being really one of the, I would say, one of the premier volunteers, not just in this East Texas region, but state. Corey was there on the floor with me the day that we had the vote on the Convention of States. And I'll tell you, it's one of the highlights of my session, that we got to spend one time there at my desk. But yes, we've been working for that for several sessions. And it's been a priority. Matter of fact, the governor wrote a book on it, right? And basically, if you don't know what that is, in a nutshell, it is an opportunity to allow states to bandy together and push back on the federal government.
Right.
It's one of the few options that we have under our United States Constitution to stand up and speak and take back our federal government. Did I say that about right? And so there was never any question in my mind, last session nor this session, about which side I was going to be on. And this really was a fairly divisive issue. But I stand here today still proud to have stood with you and a lot of folks. Matter of fact, in my district, it wasn't unanimous, but it was darn close. Everybody supported that Convention of the States idea, and I'm just hopeful we can get the requisite numbers to make it happen across the country. Thank you for your leadership on that. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Question about the TRS health
Yes.
care.
It's one of the few issues I kind of know a little about.
My husband and I are both on the Medicare Advantage program, and the last year it was $225 for the two of us. Well, effective January 1st, it's going to be $529. So, which is an increase of $394.
Yeah, a little more than double. That's right.
And my question is, so I did a little bit of research. One, I called TRS and I said, this has got to be a mistake. It can't be right.
How long did it take you to get through?
I have called one day and did not get through. I actually called the Aetna line, and somebody there said, if you will wait on the line, I'll get you through. And I waited at least 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, now today though, I called today and I asked for a callback. And they said, we will call you back in 24 minutes. And I want you to know, sweet little Anita called me back in 24 minutes.
Good, Anita. All right.
So, anyway, so I did a little bit of research. Well, based upon the information that I got, that if I were just to insure myself as a retiree and stay with TRS, it would cost $135 a month, plus what I have to pay for Medicare. Because I don't get Social Security to pay for it.
That's right.
Then, by adding my spouse, though, then it becomes that $529.
That's right.
Okay, which means that just to have my spouse on the plan, it's costing $394. Can you explain why it's costing that much to insure my spouse? Now, and before you answer, I called Humana independently and just said, hey, what would it cost for me to insure my husband? $116 a month.
116.
For the same plan that TRS is offering. Now, I asked Anita today, I said, can you tell me a little bit more about this? I said, because I have an opportunity to pose a question to Trent Ashby tonight, and I want to at least sound halfway.
So you say Trent who?
And I said I wanted to sound at least halfway knowledgeable. And she said the only thing that she knew is that in the seminars she's attended, that be cautious, because what could occur is that 116, kind of like what car insurance happens, that the minute you file a claim, then your monthly premium is going to go up. So, but my bottom line question is, why is it costing that much to insure my husband?
So, let me answer that and also comment a little bit about on that other plan. And I'm going to be brief because you and I can visit afterwards. Long story short, the healthcare premiums that were set in place and that were voted on not by the legislature, by the TRS board that governs all the healthcare programs, they're passing on straight cost. There's no administrative cost there for TRS. I mean, that is the true cost to provide the health insurance under the TRS care plan. That ties into what I want to say about this other plan that they talked to you about, the $116. I sat through the seminar last week in Lufkin, both of them, the morning and the afternoon, with hundreds of retired teachers. And this question was asked several times. The one thing I want to caution you is that according to the TRS representative along with the insurance company representative, Humana was quick to say that we offer a lot of different Medicare Advantage type products and plans, but there's not a single one that we offer that is rich in benefit as the TRS care plan, because yours is a PPO, not an HMO. And your deductibles, your co-pays, your maximum out of pocket, according to them, as they have these products, it's a lot lower than it would be if you went with a perceived cheaper plan. And so they were really trying to push people away. Don't just look at the sticker price, look at the real benefits of that program. And I would just say, you make your decision. I don't want to make your healthcare decision for you. I get in big trouble. But I would tell you, I would be real cautious about looking at that plan that's not the TRS care plan, because that TRS care plan is about as good a plan as you're going to find. I promise you it's as good a plan as you're going to find. The question is, will you make that jump from the $135 for you versus to the $529 for you and your spouse? So, and we can visit a little more afterwards if you'd like a little more detail about that. Yes, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me end with this. It is always a privilege to be over here with you. And I want you to know that I don't take for granted my position as your state representative. I never forget who I'm working for. I work for you. And if there's ever anything that I can do to help you with a state matter, and I don't mind saying it, Judge, in front of everybody, I get calls every day about county stuff, cities. Hey, I got a sweet lady called me. Trent, I got a possum in my trash can in the backyard. Who can and let me tell you, we're the best at facilitating those calls and those constituents to their appropriate city or county officials. So we're a one-stop shop. Thank y'all for having me.